Henry wouldn't have called himself a lonely man, not really. His days followed a familiar, comforting pattern. The crinkle of the morning paper arriving just before sunrise, the same pot of bold, nearly black tea brewed daily, an hour spent fussing in his unruly garden. The weeds always seemed to win, but for Henry, it was the tending that counted. His meals were modest, often just leftovers warmed up or a simple sandwich when he wasn't particularly hungry. Evenings passed with the soft hum of the radio and old westerns flickering on the television. His favorite chair had molded perfectly to his frame over the years. Since Eleanor's passing, a hush had settled over the house, a stillness that even the familiar voices of news anchors couldn't quite lift. He reminded himself this wasn't loneliness, just the way life naturally unfolded. Of course, he missed her, missed the way their conversations flowed so easily, the way she could sense what he was feeling without a word. But life had its course, didn't it? It was meant to be lived, and then, eventually, to end. Then, one bright afternoon, a knock at the door caught him off guard. He wasn't used to unexpected company. And certainly not at that odd hour, somewhere between lunch and dinner. Standing on the doorstep was a young woman, more girl than a woman, with a head of wild red hair spilling from beneath a knitted cap. Her backpack looked as though it weighed more than she did. "I'm lost," she said with an apologetic grin that somehow shifted the stillness around Henry. "Oakwood campsite, that's what I'm looking for, but I must have gone the wrong way." Her voice was bright and a touch breathless, the kind someone raised in a city might have. Henry had spent his whole life in this small town, knew every back road and worn footpath. The campsite was clearly in the other direction, but before he could think of the right words, another part of him stirred, a rusty instinct he hadn't felt in years. "Well, if it's getting dark, you're welcome to stay the night. I've got a spare room, and you don't look like the sort to do me harm." Even as he said it, the words shocked him. Common sense whispered it was foolishness, inviting a stranger in, but that old instinct, long dormant, whispered something else. Opportunity. With a jolt, he realized he couldn't quite remember the last time his house had an unexpected visitor. The girl, Lila, she said her name was already beaming at him, full of relief and gratitude. Her whirlwind energy filled the house the moment she stepped inside. It wasn't just the overflowing backpack or the trail of mismatched socks she left behind as she followed him to the guest room. It was her presence, the way she lit up the space with stories about places he'd only seen in documentaries, bustling night markets in Thailand, the vast stillness of the Australian outback. Lila's phone chirped constantly, a stream of messages or maybe videos sent to faraway friends. At first, the noise set Henry's teeth on edge, but as the afternoon wore on, he found himself strangely drawn in, asking about a temple she'd mentioned or the funny-looking fruit she showed him in a photo. Part of him wanted to retreat, to find a quiet corner and reassert his routine. Yet another part, the part he'd nearly forgotten, whispered that just a bit more disruption might not be the worst thing. Lila wouldn't let him retreat. With a determined gleam in her eye, she insisted he show her the waterfall she'd heard about in town. At first, it felt like an obligation, something to keep busy with until she was on her way. But then he laughed, genuinely, at her terrible attempt to mimic the bird calls they heard. Before he knew it, a whole afternoon had slipped by, leaving behind a surprising lightness. Small-town gossip traveled fast. Soon, the well-meaning Mrs. Whittaker was cornering him at the grocer's, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "Heard you've got a young lady staying with you, Henry. My, how things change." He sputtered something about helping a lost traveler, but if he was honest, Mrs. Whittaker's words sparked a flutter, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite romantic, but not unpleasant either. The shift was subtle at first. While working with Lila to clear out his attic, Henry found a box of Eleanor's old recipe books, a burst of warmth amid the dust. The clutter was overwhelming, but Lila, in between tales of bungee jumping in New Zealand or bartering at Bangkok markets, organized with surprising efficiency. Things felt lighter. There were gaps now, spaces on the crammed shelves, and Henry found the room they left behind less suffocating than he'd expected. One evening, as the last of summer's sun blowed through the kitchen window, he overheard Lila on the phone. Her voice was hushed, worried about money problems and desperate for a place to stay. Suspicion rose, a knot tightening in his gut. His practical mind screamed warnings, replaying the town gossip now tinged with sharper tones. He heard Eleanor's teasing voice in his head, "You always were too trusting, Henry." But then he remembered Lila smiling, the way she sang along to his father's old records. He couldn't forget the kindness in her eyes. Without really deciding, he knocked on her door and cleared his throat. "Miss Layla," he said, his voice sounding gruff even to himself. "Seems like it might be helpful for us both if you stayed a while longer. That attic of mine isn't going to clear itself." Instead of confrontation, he surprised them both by offering her a short-term job, payment in exchange for help with decluttering. Their days took on a new rhythm. They'd find forgotten treasures, an old pocket watch of his father's, a chip teapot that sparked a story about Eleanor's disastrous first attempt at baking. Leila's eyes lit up with each find, urging Henry to tell the tales behind them. The town started noticing too. First, the fresh haircut prompted by Lila's horrified gasp at his unruly mop. then the smile that reached his eyes when Mrs. Whittaker teased him again about his house guest. One afternoon, deep in the garage, they unearthed his old photo albums. "Get a load of those flares." Lila burst out laughing. Henry, a younger version of himself, stared back from a photo, wild haircut hidden under a floppy hat. "You were quite the looker back then." Henry couldn't help but grin. Time with Lila had chipped away at his settled quiet. He still treasured his routine, but now there was space in it for the unexpected. A lot of that unexpected involved technology. First, Lila taught him how to search online for gardening tips. "You see, Henry, it's like a giant encyclopedia, but way faster." Then came the afternoon she convinced him to order groceries online. "It's like magic, Henry, I swear." Lila grinned, perched on the kitchen stool, furiously tapping away at his old laptop. "You just pick what you want, click a button, and they deliver it to your door." Henry eyed the screen with suspicion. "Seems like a lot of fuss to avoid going to the store. Besides," he teased, "what will I do with all my spare time?" Lila simply patted his arm. "Trust me, this will open up a whole new world for you." An hour later, he had to admit, it was oddly satisfying to add items to a virtual cart. Sure, the website was confusing, and he fumbled a few times, but Lila patiently guided him through. When they finally hit checkout, a small surge of triumph bubbled up inside him. 2 days later, when a cheerful delivery man brought boxes right into his kitchen, he nearly whooped with delight. Fresh tomatoes, bread that wasn't squashed, even a few treats he wouldn't have picked up in person. Henry had to concede, maybe this modern world wasn't so bad after all. "See." Lila beamed from the doorway, hands dusted with flour from her latest baking experiment. "I told you it was magic." And then it was time for her to go. She found a job at the diner, a tiny apartment above an old bookstore. Nothing fancy, but her smile held a hope he hadn't seen since Eleanor. He wished her well, the words thick in his throat, knowing it wasn't quite goodbye. He helped remove her few belongings. As they loaded the last box into her friend's battered car, something shiny caught his eye. It was the photo from their attic expedition. Him in those ridiculous flares, Eleanor beside him, both caught mid-laugh. Lila held it up, now framed in a simple wooden frame she must have scrounged from somewhere. "A thank you," she said, her voice soft, "for reminding me it's okay to start over." She hesitated, a smile playing on her lips. "For showing me even old houses can have hidden treasures." As he shut the door behind her, the emptiness of his house hit him, but this time, it felt different. The photo, once buried, was now meant to be displayed. It wasn't just a memory anymore, but a testament to the unexpected joy that had bloomed within his walls, a reminder that even an old dog, as Eleanor used to tease, could learn a few new tricks. He found himself drawn to Eleanor's old recipe book and smiled, remembering how Lila's eyes lit up when she discovered the recipe for Eleanor's famous apple crumble. At that moment, it felt wrong to keep all of Eleanor's warmth to himself, not when it could light someone else's new beginning. On impulse, he wrapped the book carefully. The next day, he found himself at Lila's new apartment above the bookstore. Her surprised laugh when she opened the door chased away any hesitation. "This is for you," he said, handing her the package. "Figured you might need some inspiration for your new kitchen." Her eyes scanned the faded cover, and a wide smile lit her face. "Eleanor's recipes. Henry, you shouldn't have." "It's no use to me sitting on a shelf," he said, with a touch of warmth softening his gruffness. "Besides," he added with a playful glint in his eye, "I never quite got the hang of that apple crumble." A week later, colorful flyers for a local walking group appeared on the library's notice board. He paused, fingers hovering just above the contact number. Could he do this? Walk alongside strangers? Make small talk? The old Henry would step back, found a reason not to, but a memory of Lila's resolute smile gave him a gentle push. What did he have to lose? Taking a steady breath, he made the call. To his surprise, the town responded with warmth. Welcoming voices on the other end invited him to join. He even found himself sharing a lighthearted quip with Mrs. Whittaker at the market the following day. Henry hadn't undergone a complete transformation overnight, but he also wasn't quite the man who had once opened the door to a lost girl on that golden afternoon. He still cherished his peaceful mornings. His garden remained more wild than well kept. Yet, threaded through the familiar rhythm of his daily life was something new, a fresh note in the melody. He no longer felt that heavy, lingering loneliness. He was simply open now. And maybe, just maybe, that was the true heart of living. What are your thoughts on this story? I'd love to hear your opinions, so please share them in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Stay tuned for our upcoming content. See you in the next video.